active in Zambia. And I'll just start with her because she's personally known to me. But then Linda and her colleagues will take over, and they'll let us know how they've arranged themselves to talk with colleagues. And we listen to them. And I hope that at the end, there can be an interactive discussion, which again, they can moderate, and we can only assist to the extent wanted. So to my colleague, Linda Kasonde, I would say please take over and you'll introduce your colleagues to us and tell us how you'd like to take this. Thank you.
Hello and good evening to everyone. Thank you so much for coming. It's a really critical time for Zambia. As many of you know, Zambia has been a peaceful country, and we reintroduced multi-party democracy in 1991. And since then, we've had several peaceful transfers of power. So what we are currently experiencing in our current election period is totally unprecedented. We really are on the precipice of losing our democracy. I just want to introduce, I actually can't see them, our colleagues who are supposed to speak on this panel. There's Dr. Sishua, who is a Zambian historian, well known to some of you, who I think it's fair to say predicted much of what is happening now, much to our chagrin. I don't see Mrs. Beauty Katebe there. Is Ms. Fides Temba there? Okay. So I think what we'll do, a good place to start would be with the background, the history of how we've arrived at where we're at now. So I will hand over to Dr. Sishua to set the scene for us as to what has been happening in the last 5 years in Zambia as we've led up to this August 2026 general election. And then we'll get into discussing what is happening currently in the country as we wait for the final election results to be announced. Dr. Sishua, I hand over to you.
Thank you so much. I hope that I'm clear. Thank you so much, Madam Kasonde. I was hoping that you didn't put me on the spot by starting so that I don't make the mistakes that others can learn from. In terms of the understanding how we got here, I think it's important to frame this in the context of Zambia within Southern Africa. Maybe even Africa generally. Unlike many countries in the region, Zambia has a very established democratic tradition, which has been noted as a model for other countries, and that history has rested on the presence of a number of factors. One has been the existence of a set of institutions that have been very crucial to coming together to defend democracy whenever democracy is under attack. Civil society initially, grouped around church organizations, were joined by non-governmental organizations, NGOs, in the 1990s, following the country's transition to multi-party democracy. And even though the character of the civil society changed in the context of neoliberalism, where the kind of mass organizations that characterized civic organizations in the 1970s and 80s, that is, religious organizations, trade union movement, weakened. What really helped was the emergence of these new associations whose existence benefited from the presence of a liberal constitution that secured their rights. And that was also aided to an extent by the emergence of a private media that thrived over the course of the next few decades and providing platform to new opposition parties that emerged following the transition to multi-party rule. That there were also other institutions like the Electoral Commission of Zambia, because until 1996, the country didn't have an independent professional electoral commission. It was constituted as and when the elections, normally headed by Deputy Chief Justice. But in the 1990s, it was felt that it was important to create such a body. And what was also important was the legislation that established the commission. It was stated very clearly that the commission should always be led by a judge or a former judge at the superior court level, that is High Court or Supreme Court, and that in the instance that you didn't have such a person, and the person who leads the commission should be somebody who qualifies to hold judicial office at that senior level. And since the establishment of the commission, the tradition has been that presidents used their prerogative to appoint either sitting judges or former judges all the way until 2021, the election. And then you also had the existence of strong opposition parties that were able to mobilize support, hold peaceful assemblies. And that tradition, was also aided by the presence of, a deep politicized military. Zambia didn't have the history of neighboring countries such as Zimbabwe, Namibia, or Angola, where the liberation movement had a liberation army, which, following the achievement of independence, transitioned to become the guarantor of state power for that liberation movement. In the case of Zambia, independence was won by the pen rather than the gun. And that really aided the fact that the military was able to be kept away from politics. Soldiers themselves began to believe, or rather came to embrace, the ballot as an important mechanism of changing governments. And so democracy was strengthened by really a constellation of these factors. And that remained the case until, I think, 2011, when Zambia experienced its second transition. The election of Michael Sata and his party, the Patriotic Front, began to build or plant some of the seeds that were to germinate over the course of that decade. Opposition parties such as the former ruling party that Sata defeated, a movement for multi-party democracy that had been in power since 1991, found themselves deregistered through the abuse of 30 institutions, such as the Registrar of Societies in Zambia. Political parties until 2016 were governed by a department under the Ministry of Home Affairs called the Registrar of Societies. That was problematic because usually this ministry is led by politicians, so they use this kind of institutions to undermine their political competitors in the opposition. But then we had the relatively, independent judges who could do curtail some of the executive overreach, and so the decision to suspend and rather deregister the MOD was quashed by the High Court. And the Sata didn't live long. He was ailing by the time he won power. He was in advanced age, so he died in office in 2014 and was succeeded by Edgar Lungu, who was to govern the country until 2021. It was really under the rule of Edgar Lungu where we saw democracy eroding on a serious scale. Lungu shut down the Post newspaper, which was the country's leading private daily, established in 1991 as part of the liberalization of the media landscape. Lungu also shut down the main private television network called Prime TV. In both cases, the argument was legal. Like, in the case of the Post, they said they owed the state some outstanding taxes, and they used that excuse to say the newspaper had failed to settle its debt, and therefore the state was shutting it down. the newspaper, of course, disputed that those claims failed to pay. We are just disputing this. Can we reconcile the figures? But that wasn't done, and the post was shut down, which was a very, very sad development, given that the Post newspaper was very important even to the strength of civil society. Then the Prime TV was shut down on the basis that their license had expired. They forgot to renew it before 6 months as required by law. And they appealed to the Minister of Information at the time, Dora Silia, were unsuccessful. So what you saw was what we characterize as lawfare, the use of legal mechanisms to undermine democracy. In a strict sense, what the government was doing was not illegal. They had the authority, for example, to take the decision they did. But what we see here is an abuse of the law. And then you had the civil society also increasingly coming under attack from political elites in power. Some of Zambia's foremost civic activists, such as Laura Miti, Linda Kasonde herself was leading the Law Association of Zambia, came under increased attacks from members of the ruling party. Laura Miti and her colleagues in civil society were constantly arrested for protesting against government excesses such as corruption. Linda Kasonde, who did more than most of us to provide direction when she was leading the Law Association of Zambia, showing courage, inspiring courage as well as example, was attacked on multiple levels. And at one time, the Law Association itself was threatened with the multiplicity, like the government supporters threatened to create other statutory entities that would have really fragmented the lawyers. And then opposition parties also came under severe, attack. Hakainde Hichilema, the current president, was arrested in 2017 on what many people saw as a traffic violation for failure to give away the presidential motorcade. But that incident was that innocuous, incident was turned into a very serious offense of treason. The state claimed that he was seeking to topple the president, and they arrested him and kept him in detention for about 4 months before domestic and international pressure forced the government to release him. Parliament also saw significant attacks. MPs of the main opposition party, over 40 of them at one time, were suspended. The executive then also created a set of institutions such as the Constitutional Court, into which the president appointed the people who were seen generally as lacking the required competence and qualification to serve on the court, but were seen as allies of the president. So what we see over the course of the 2010s was an executive that undermined the guardrails of democracy, civil society, opposition, parliament, and it was partly in response to this closing democratic space that the current president of the opposition positioned himself on the reformist ticket to say, if elected, he was going to strengthen democracy in addition to repairing the economy, because Lungu and the Patriotic Front were very keen to embark on a poorly managed, nationalization of the mining industries that created even economic difficulties. That's how the 2021 election happened. And despite the restrictions imposed by the COVID pandemic, as well as the ways in which the state itself limited rights, there was a peaceful transition. Edgar Lungu initially resisted to concede because of pressure from within the governing party that felt that they could do something about it. But in the end, following the intervention of a number of key leaders such as the AU and the SADC election observation mission leaders, by Koroma, the former president of Sierra Leone, and the Jakaya Kikwete, former president of Tanzania, as well as former president of Zambia, Rupia Banda, Lungu conceded peacefully, and there was a smooth transition. The next 5 years were, many Zambians expected that the 2010s would be a thing of the past, that democracy would thrive. But what we saw was something different. Initially, there was a window of opportunity that the president took advantage of to repeal a section of repressive law that was in the Penal Code, which his predecessors had used to undermine free speech, called the Defamation of the President law. And many of us got excited thinking that was just the beginning, but it turned out to be the end, in the sense that what happened over the course of the following years were three broader developments that I think undermined democracy. The first was the creation of new legislation that the current president had actually opposed when he was in opposition. So Lungu, before he left office, passed a very repressive cybersecurity law that human rights activists argued undermined democracy. But the president in opposition said that would be the first law that he repeals when if elected. He was elected, but rather than repealing it, he actually created two statutes out of it, both of them containing new provisions that actually were more repressive than the original law. So what we saw was reform without change. And he dusted off his administration, that he dusted off colonial era legislation, particularly the law to do with sedition, to arrest so many people whose offense, I think, could qualify to be part of robust political debate. It almost became an offense to criticize the authorities, even when you're in opposition. So what we saw were the arrest of both ordinary citizens and political actors, and the result of the resuscitation of these laws. And then we had the opposition parties deny the right to peaceful assembly, unlike in the PF era where you could have this kind of this right enjoyed perhaps sparingly. In the context of the last 5 years, opposition parties were totally denied the exercise of this right by the authorities on two grounds. One was that the government didn't have sufficient policemen and women to manage these assemblies, and that there were security concerns that were never identified. So over the course of the 5 years, it was very difficult for citizens to associate themselves because the right to peaceful assembly has within it, I think, two other rights. The right to free speech, because people meet to talk. But it also has the right of association undermined, because people who meet to talk are usually those who support the same party. And that provided some of the seeds that we see Amnesty International providing their latest report on Zambia, which was released on I think on 10th August, where they show that there was, over the last 5 years, a degree of authoritarian tendencies by the current administration, which was disappointing for government that was elected on a ticket of reform. Then we also see undermining other institutions. The most notable one was the Electoral Commission of Zambia, where for the first time since the body was established, we see the president appointing somebody who has never been a judge. And that's not to say that she doesn't qualify to hold the role. Mangara Zarumis was appointed, qualified to hold the job of chairperson because she had the requisite legal experience. The reason why previous presidents gravitated towards appointing serving judges was because judges are seen as impartial or apolitical. We don't know which party they support. The nature of their job requires them to be above politics. And the people then tend to retain a degree of trust in those kind of elites. So that was a first departure that alarmed many people. But the president didn't end there. He appointed two other commissioners, both of whom had the links to the current party in power. The most recent one was appointed actually on the eve of nominations in May this year. The president plucked that person away from their campaign onto the commission. Again, criticism from the opposition and civil society didn't deter disappointment, which simply required a simple majority to confirm in the National Assembly. So they all passed. So going to the election, what you had was an electoral commission that was not seen as impartial. It's normal for political elites to be a little bit suspicious of electoral commission, but what we had this time was a blatantly clear example of an incumbent who used institutional prerogatives to advance partisan agendas. And then the other final point I think that I should mention before we go further was the way in which civic voices were undermined. Many of the critical voices that spoke out against the Lungu era excesses were appointed to key government bodies, or some of them in the diplomatic service. Now that's a good thing in one sense, because you want the best of us to be given the chance to implement some of the ideas that they have when in civil society. But the scale of his appointment was such that they really deprived civil society of some of the most experienced voices that were required, because they couldn't criticize the same government that they were part of. So what you saw there was not simply a president who was willing to hunt for talent, perhaps under the belief that talent is not randomly distributed, you have got to search for it, but one who was strategically undermining an important alternative source of authority by getting the best of such people and putting them in key position. For others, just self-censorship, because many of the critical academics who were outspoken in the previous era suddenly withdrew, even when some of the excesses that happened under the Lungu era reappeared under the last 5 years. And going into the election, these concerns resulted into a situation where the opposition didn't really have a flag bearer going to the election, because the main opposition party was undermined from within by the state. They couldn't even field candidates in the end in this election. So what you had was an opposition leader who emerged by default. The opposition, the HLM administration, I think, cohered around specific policy failures, particularly in relation to anti-corruption, national unity, democracy itself, as I said, aspect of the cost of living was very, very important in key areas. What was missing all along, I think, was the vehicle of expressing that opposition. And when the state tried to cripple opposition, Mondovile Brian, who was the main, who emerged as the main rival, found himself standing on a smaller, relatively, unknown political organization, and Zambians rallied behind this person. The ruling party was surprised by the scale of the rallies that he was able to draw, but in the end, he, despite initial attempts to try to undermine his nomination, he ended up on the ballot. And I should end by talking about the obstacles that emerged in the context of the campaigns. We could talk about the other candidates. I think I want to focus on this one because it's very important to understanding how we got here. After he was confirmed as the main opposition candidate, the Electoral Commission did something strange. They produced a campaign schedule that excluded the president on the basis that he's the head of state and therefore he could go to any part of Zambia anytime he wanted. That was problematic because it effectively placed the incumbent president over and above the law, essentially, failing to distinguish between his role as the head of state as well as his partisan role as a presidential candidate for the ruling party. It allowed him to use state resources for what essentially were government activities, rather partisan activities. But that was just the beginning. The next thing was the government grabbed the passport for the opposition leader. He couldn't get out of the country to mobilize support, and in the end, he had to rely on crowdfunding, on GoFundMe to raise some capital, because the local businessmen who supported him were identified for victimization. Then the media, ideally we should provide a level playing field. The state media, that is, never covered the opposition. They simply covered the party in power. These were concerns that I think the current president, when he was in opposition, highlighted as thing that he would change given a chance. But that didn't happen. The opposition were missing public media, but the government also crowded out of the opposition in the private media through advertising. So there wasn't a level playing field in terms of media coverage. There were reports of violence, violent activities targeted at opposition. Ruling party cadres attacked the opposition in several places, but none of them were apprehended. In some cases, the police themselves participated in these attacks by, stopping abruptly campaign rallies that were, including those that were lawfully, convened. And finally, the Electoral Commission itself, I think, failed to exercise a degree of control over the campaign period, particularly in relation to the activities of the government, of the governing party. So what we saw going into the election before we got into that was a political environment characterized by shrinking democratic space, one where the rights of association, of assembly, of free speech were severely undermined. Citizens lived in this environment characterized by a climate of fear, and but people were still hopeful that we can change everything through the ballot until the last few weeks, another few days that have happened, which I'm sure we are going to discuss. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Seshiwa. I knew you'd be able to pull it off. So we're very grateful that you've set the scene in terms of where we're at now. So basically, it's a history of a decline of democracy, a shrinking of the civic space, and a suppression of any opposition in the run-up to this election. So I think we'll move on to where we're at now today. Our election was held on Thursday, 13th August. And I think by most accounts, everyone would agree that it was peacefully held. The actual polling day was peacefully held. We had actually anticipated an internet shutdown. That did not happen. But the subsequent events have been extremely troubling. And I'll now hand over to Fides Temba to explain what has been happening since polling day. She's also been at the headquarters of the Electoral Commission Announcement Center. So she's also monitoring there. So Fides, if you could just bring us up to speed as to where we're at now.
Thank you so much, Linda, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Seshiwa. It was great listening to you. Sorry, we are in a space where there's a bit of noise. We are at the National Totaling Center here at Mulungushi International Conference Center. So like everyone else has said, that we went to the poll on the 13th of August, 2026, and the day was very peaceful. And I immediately after following the election day, I think we noticed a bit of strange happenings, contrary to the laws of Zambia. First is the closure of the polling stations. In particular, in some polling stations were closed at the right time, but then I think there were some instructions that were given to reopen the polling, and then other people were allowed to vote, which was contrary to the laws of Zambia. Then we also had situations where I think election materials, most of them were not distributed on time, like the sealing of envelopes. The counting was also delayed at the polling center where we were with Annie. I mean, according to the laws of Zambia, immediately you close, you're supposed to start counting. In some polling stations, they had to wait for a number of hours because they never had trays, they never had envelopes to seal, the ballot papers. Getting into the night, we then just had disturbances of how some polling agents were chased from the polling stations, and also counting was delayed. How some ballot boxes were stolen. Some were dumped in drainages. Some were bent. Then we had situations where there was violence, media intimidation. Then one of the polling, I think, monitors was actually killed. And then I think thereafter there was a bit of noise, and then we had ECZ suspend, which is very unlikely because then there were sporadic cases of violence. We did not understand why they had to suspend the counting of votes. Then I think after a number of civil society actors, the Observer Mission, International Observer Mission, I think then they had to lift and Law Association of Zambia issued a statement because there was no legal basis for the suspension of the counting. Then the suspension was lifted immediately after 6 hours. Our concern is that what happened between the time that the suspension was done. Nobody can account for that time because most of the polling stations, polling monitors, polling agents were chased away from the stations. The polling stations were manned by law enforcement officers. Up to now, nobody has given us a statement to what truly transpired within that 5-6 hours. Okay. And then now we have, I think, in different constituencies, we've seen delayed announcement of results, unprecedented delayed. And then we've also seen in confirmed reports, also videos going around of how some presiding officers were not even able to read the correct citation of. So we're also asking, where were these usually I think the practice has been where in schools it's been like school of government officials that have been mandated to do that. The exercise of recruitment of presiding officers leaves much to be desired, honestly speaking, because we had situations where presiding officers were not even able to mention their name and cite the actual citations for them to be able to either open or close a polling station. That is a serious concern. Thereafter, I think it's also where we had some videos showing where people were found in bushes, with ballot boxes and all. And then the intimidation of the media, they continued the abduction of different prominent political actors. And I think that has been a very serious concern for us. But also we have noticed in this particular election where we have security wings that provide security, and this is usually the Zambia Police Service. But in this election, we have seen the army. We're wondering what is it, because even the day that there were sporadic violence cases within town, we then discovered that it was actually the army that was patrolling most of the streets of Lusaka. Then there were, I think, cases where the main opposition political actors were attacked. I think one of them was the aspiring candidate for Kawata. His residence was burnt and his patrolling center was burnt. We are running a situation room the day of elections, and when we were totaling, it was put down. And so I think all these, I think we have seen, and we do experience some of these intimidations, I think, from the time that we got independence. But this particular election, there's been a huge number of irregularities, and this.
Fidus, you're on mute. Fidus, you're on mute.
Hello?
We can hear you now.
Okay, so I think this is all emanating from the point where we had to amend the Electoral Act prior to having elections, I think months before elections. And I think civil society actors and all the actors did not have enough time to go through, like what is it that has been amended, the clauses, and what does it mean? And I think we saw that at play the day that, the counting was suspended. And so for us, we need to get back to the amendment of that act. But also, I think we need to be, after the elections, I think going forward, we need to begin to interrogate some of these legal frameworks because they are a threat to our democracy. Just the happenings of this election, the slow coming in of, right now, we have 226 constituencies, yeah? And we voted on the 13th of August. Presidential elections results, we are only 105 constituencies have been announced so far. There were remaining with 121 constituencies to be announced. We took 3 days to announce the compilation of 105 constituencies. We're thinking, will we be able to announce the results between 121 remaining constituencies between now and the 17th of August, when we were promised that they will be able to declare a winner? So for us, I think, and also the other thing, Linda, that is happening, and key stakeholders are complaining, is I think in 2021, we had a situation where I think all key stakeholders would get together, verify the results, and ensure that they are the correct results coming from the different constituencies before the announcement of the results. But also an enabling environment where even after the announcements are done, key stakeholders are given an opportunity just to ask questions. It's like we're just there to listen, and if somebody's giving instructions, there's no consultation, there's no discussion. And I think that's really an unfair, and it's not an enabling environment, because we are key stakeholders. So why are we here? If they're calling us key stakeholders, why are we not having, a part in terms of verifying the results? So who's verifying these results? So we feel like in the absence of transparency and accountability of these results, because we sent monitors in these constituencies, in these wards, and therefore we also have our own parallel tallying of the results. We just want to make sure whether what is being transmitted now is the correct result of what is there at constituency level. So that opportunity is not being given by the Electoral Commission of Zambia, and it's actually bringing a lot of doubt and a lot of I think we are doubting the credibility of these results, because there's no enabling environment for all of us to sit and agree and discuss and verify and agree. They're just like the monitors are agreeing at constituency level. I think also that should have been extended to all of us. So basically, this is what is happening currently. We are waiting for another set of results to be announced in about 11 minutes from now, hoping that they will be able to stick to time. We've also experienced, I think, a situation where they are not respecting, the time, because they would announce, they would tell you, we'll be meeting at such a time. It's taking them 2 hours to come back without any apology or anything before they could announce results. So people are waiting anxiously, and then the communication is also very poor, I would say. So yeah, I think this is what we are experiencing here at the National Totaling Center. But the same experience here is the experience that most of our monitors at constituency level are experiencing, because some of them are still waiting. They have not even had an opportunity to step out because of just some of the things that are happening. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you so much, Fides. That was a great run through of what's happening at the moment. I will just add on to some of the things that Fides has said. So sure, I don't think you touched on Bill 7, did you? Are you there?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So in terms of the background to this election, what we saw was a manipulation of the constitutional and legal framework around elections to favor the incumbent. So in 2025, the government presented a bill before the National Assembly called the Constitution Amendment Bill number 7 of 2025. And essentially, those amendments were designed to give an inbuilt majority to whoever wins the presidential election, by firstly adding what they called proportional representation seats, which are tied to whoever wins the presidential election, and also increasing the number of seats, which was tied to the delimitation process that took place last year. So under our constitution, the constitution mandates that the constituencies should be reviewed every 10 years. And so this delimitation process was conducted. It was not transparent. It was not open. And the result was that the political strongholds of the incumbent have had a greater weight in terms of their votes compared to larger centers of voters such as Lusaka and the Copperbelt, which are traditionally the areas where the deciding vote happens, I would say. I hope that's a fair thing to say. So we've seen the weakening of the vote in those areas, Lusaka and the Copperbelt, and a strengthening in the strongholds of the incumbent. And then on top of that, the proportional representation seats which favor whoever wins the presidential election. Then the Electoral Process Act was introduced just before the election, as I think it was Fides who mentioned. And amongst the provisions in that act, in terms of nominations for seats, the Secretary General and one other official of the party have to approve who ultimately gets adopted. And this became a problem because the former ruling party, the Patriotic Front, was essentially infiltrated by an affiliate of the ruling party. And basically the party was taken over by that affiliate, and the true members of the party were pushed out to the fringes. And so the whole party disintegrated and were somewhat in disarray. There was no real organized opposition for most of the time that the incumbent has been in office, and by design, as I mentioned. And also, the former president, Edgar Lungu, tried to rally the party, but ultimately he died over a year ago, which of course further confusion in the party. And it's only recently that the opposition have kind of coalesced around what is called the Tonse Pamosi Alliance. And from that alliance emerged the leading opposition political party, the NRPUP. Don't ask me to spell out the acronym at the moment. So the head of the NRP, the presidential candidate, was Brian Mundubile, with his running mate, Makebi Zulu, both of whom are lawyers and former provincial ministers in the previous government. So they haven't exactly come from nowhere, but it's been quite interesting to see how quickly they've managed to mobilize support. And I think that's mainly due to the fact that the two main election issues in this particular election are the high cost of living and also high unemployment rates. So I'm sure you've heard wonderful stories about how well Zambia is doing at a macroeconomic level, but this has not translated into better living standards for ordinary Zambians. For example, at the time that the ruling UPND party took office in 2021, the Jesuit Center for Theological Reflection does a needs assessment basket for a family of 5. And they estimated that around August 2021, a food basket for a family of 5 cost 8,400 kwacha. And currently, that needs basket for a family of 5 costs 12,100 kwacha. And just to give put that into context, the average income of a Zambian family, average between the rural income and the urban income, is around 3,000 or just over 3,000 kwacha. So people are struggling to make ends meet. And this has been the hot issue in this election and may explain why Mr. Mundubile has been able to emerge seemingly from nowhere. So the other thing I wanted to mention regarding the suspension of the count of the tallying and the announcement of votes on 14th August, there was no legal basis for this. And it also did not appear to be a rational or proportionate decision based on the reasons given by the Electoral Commission. The Electoral Commission had said that there was sporadic violence in some polling stations, which they did not name, and decided based on those small outbreaks or alleged outbreaks to suspend the tallying and announcement of the votes on a nationwide basis. And as Sishua mentioned, this is completely unprecedented. It's never happened in our election history. And as Fides was mentioning, the 6 hours that the tallying had stopped, the center where the votes were being kept was being guarded by police and army officers. There were no independent monitors, observers, polling agents, or any other kind of official who had access to these ballot boxes. And the Electoral Commission has told us that some ballot boxes went missing. So it just calls into question whether or not the result, whatever it is, will be credible. The other thing I wanted to mention with regards, I think Fides sort of touched on it, but I think I want to go into greater detail. Something that has arisen in this particular election that we have never seen before. I think it's fair to say, even in unique times, at election time, certainly, where political party candidates have been abducted. And so specifically, the NRP-UP, the leading opposition political candidate, Mr. Brian Mundubile, had his house raided on the 14th of August. The following day, he's gone missing. We do not know what his whereabouts are. His spokesperson for the NRP-UP, Mr. George Chisanga, who also happens to be a former Law Association or Bar Association president, equally was picked up by armed, uniformed persons, and he went missing for some time. We've just found him last night, at a police station. He's being denied access to his family and lawyers. Also abducted was Bishop Trevor Mwamba, who is the president of the UNIP, which was the Independence political party, and he went missing, but has subsequently been found also at a police station, also being denied access to legal counsel and his family. People are trying to have these people released. And then also in the run-up to the election, several Tonse Alliance, which was the opposition alliance, members were rounded up and detained and have been detained indefinitely. They have not been brought to court. And from reports that I have received, certainly at least in one instance with regards to one opposition political party member, his lawyers have been attempting to get him released through the courts. And unfortunately, literally, the courts are dodging him. He can't get redress. And this, apparently, from reports I've received, is because judicial officers are being intimidated by security forces. So these are all very serious things that are happening in our country that are completely unprecedented. We have never, ever seen these things before. The other thing that isn't quite unprecedented, so in the 2021 general election, the Patriotic Front party decided to deploy the army on election day. But thankfully, in that instance, they did not interfere with the electoral process or the electoral outcome. That has been different in this instance. The army has been deployed despite civil society issuing statements to the effect that only the Zambia Police Service are constitutionally mandated to protect the internal security of any country. And so the deployment of the army is actually unconstitutional. As we speak, they have been manning polling stations. They're at the totaling center at Mulungushi Center, and they are being used to intimidate people, as Fides mentioned, from verifying information. Stakeholders at the Mulungushi are not being allowed to ask questions of the Electoral Commission freely and, without intimidation. These armed men coalesce around you when you start asking too many questions. So these are all things we've never seen in our country. Zambia is a peaceful country, and we've had our issues with elections, but never to this extent where we are in doubt as to whether the result will be credible. The other thing I wanted to mention is perhaps a call to action on behalf of civil society. We need voices to speak out on our behalf. We need bar associations, the international media, and other stakeholders who have influence on the international sphere to speak out about the things that are happening in our country. Zambia is a beacon of democracy on the continent, and we cannot allow democracy to fail here. We must ensure that we protect our democracy. I think I'll just stop here for now and see if there are any questions of any of the panelists. I can't see any hands.
Then I can also see there are one or two questions in the chat.
I can't see that.
Yeah. I can try and read them for you, the ones I can see.
Yes, please.
Aaron Nkowane asked, are we saying that there are counting points where there were no polling agents or political parties involved in the election? Any specific examples? Then Chilufia Chileshe asked Fides, can you say more about the verification step that was allegedly skipped at the Presidential Totaling Center?
Are there any other questions?
And then, yeah, Aaron Nkowane asked again that some of the claims made here about ECZ must be counterbalanced with ECZ personnel. Although Brenda also asked Aaron to then say which claims in particular. Then I can see Andrea Capellan, my colleague Andrea Capellan asked, did you say that the main opposition candidate, Mundubile, himself has been abducted and his whereabouts are also unknown? So those are some of the questions as of now.
Thank you. Fides, would you like to go?
Yes, I'd like to go because I would want to go in. So if you remember, Linda, in the 2021 elections, whenever the results were transposed to the main totaling center for the presidential, so if there are any queries from the members of the stakeholders within the room, ECZ will retreat with the members, the stakeholders, and they will do that verification, okay? Just to ensure, because one thing we should know is we all have monitors out there, okay? And then the monitors are sending in information. So if there's any discrepancy, for instance, there was a I think there was, is it yesterday or this morning, where one polling station was mentioned twice, was called twice. And so when you want to verify, you stop. I think in 2021, there was a courtesy where the ECZ would actually retreat with the stakeholders, verify that. If there are any issues, would verify, will all be satisfied, and then they would resume. We have not seen that this year. If there's any query and if the stakeholders want to question and if they want to like engage ECZ on some of the numbers based on the tallying at constituency level and what is big, if there's just any discrepancy they have shown, I think what we noticed is they are not giving an opportunity for stakeholders to really sit, speak and engage. And maybe even just retreat and say, you know what, maybe we can retreat, because that was practiced in 2021. And we saw that also in 2016. But in this tallying of that, we've seen that it is not happening. And I think there's that frustration from stakeholders to say, why are we here then if we can't engage and just agree to say we have this and you have that, and can we reach a common ground? Probably it's our discrepancy or it's your discrepancy, just to share notes. And I thought that practice that we had in 2021 worked very well as opposed to what is happening currently. And if you saw, I think, was it yesterday, where some of the I think from the alliance of the ruling party, somebody had to walk in with a pajama and came and he was instructing the ECZ to say they should not entertain stakeholders. It was in full view of everybody. There was the cameras there. What authority was that person acting on, coming to instruct ECZ not to entertain stakeholders who were invited by ECZ because they thought they had authority to do that? Someone who is in pajamas, and he was given the mic and he was shouting, and yet stakeholders in there who are in the room, been sleeping here at the totaling center, are not given that opportunity to do that. So it's just those, for me, the standards, why are we changing standards? So those are some of the things that probably we need to engage, and we are documenting. For us, we are documenting, and we are hoping that we could find an opportunity where we can engage, and we'll be able to share the report widely, the report at the situation room, because we have a situation room where we are document all these irregularities we are seeing, but also the experiences and the practices happening currently. Thank you.
Thank you. Seshua, do you want to come in at this point?
Sure. So, a couple of points there. The first is that we have to understand what's happening in Zambia at an essential level. What you actually have is a coup being carried out by the president in conjunction with the military against the people. And I'll explain that. To understand that decision, it requires you to go back to some of the points that Linda made about suspension of the vote count. So the premise of that decision was there's a pocket of violence in some districts. That's what the statement said. Now, for the sake of transparency, for example, if you make such a statement as the basis for suspending the vote count across the country, you have to name those places where the violence is, rather than leaving it to guesswork. The Electoral Commission didn't do that. Even when they suspended, rather they resumed the vote count later on, they never disclosed, for example, those districts. They just said the violence has been contained. So up to now, Zambia don't know actually what really happened in relation to the alleged acts of violence. Linda mentioned the point about the fact that there's no legislation that allows them to do this on a national scale. But a much more fundamental point also has to do with the fact that they told Zambians that ballot boxes were stolen. Polling stations are securely guarded by state police. If we go by, the recent history, for example, the only people who could have done that then are supporters of the ruling party, because there's no way opposition cadres can come into a polling station, walk in freely, grab the ballot boxes and run away with them. But also the idea that the ballot boxes were stolen was expressed very vaguely. Like, we don't know how many boxes were stolen. Is it throughout the country? Is it in specific provinces, for example? Is it in specific constituencies? That information was not provided. It is important because if 50% of the ballot boxes were stolen, then it means the whole election is not illegitimate in terms of the result. Because how do we know that the results that are being announced now are actually the ones that reflect the will of the people as expressed at the polling station level? That point assumes even greater significance when you take into account what Brenda mentioned to say we are not being allowed to verify these results, because the way the results verification, the results system works, that they are first tallied at the polling station level. When that process is completed at the polling station level, the results are sent to the district center. There's another tutoring center there, and then they're transmitted to the tutoring center in Lusaka, where the Electoral Commission is with a representative of civil society as well as political parties. When they receive them in Lusaka, they compare them, they sit down with various interested parties, that the political parties, civic organization, to say, here are the results we have received, and the one that they proceed to announce to the public are the ones that have been verified. We are being told that that important step is not happening this time, for example. In the context of the suspicion that have been generated by the stolen ballot boxes, for example, that is even more important. But we have another scenario where you have the military. After the suspicion was announced, they went into the polling stations. The journalists who gave a detailed account, I think of this yesterday or the day before, where they were showing the soldiers chasing polling agents and leaving the polling stations on demand by security personnel. Again, that is not something that should be taken lightly, because we don't know what's happening, what the purpose of chasing polling agents, if not, for example, to do something sinister. That's why that suspicion of results, given all the limitations of that decision pointed out by my colleagues, for example, is very important to understanding what's happening now. Because for the first time in the history of the country, you had soldiers at polling stations. You have polling agents who are being beaten for refusing to hand over Gen 20 forms, for example. I spoke to 3 of the people who are running away, saying, look, we are in hiding because they want these forms. I said, why do they want these forms? They said, no, we don't know. They just ordered us that we should give all the forms. So if you refuse to give the forms, you are thrown in detention or you are beaten by security. So these are soldiers who are not trained ordinarily to deal with civilians. Again, the role of the army in this election marks a significant turning point, because never before had the military played this decisive role in the election, particularly in relation to the results. The voting took place peacefully. It is the counting that brought all these problems, because the president himself was able to go to his social media page and say, I commend Zambians for voting peacefully. Election Observation Mission said the voting was characterized by peace. So where did the violence come from, for example? And it's easy then to understand the suspension as one that was designed to enable the kind of security forces to move into the polling station that we have seen. And then to intimidate citizens, we saw armored vehicles patrolling the streets, not just in Lusaka, even on the Coast Road and other places, for example. Again, that's not Zambia. If it was Zimbabwe, I would have understood, because there's no evidence that the police, for example, has failed to carry out its mandate. There was a comment about whether people can go to court, for example. You see, that's where the danger is, because I've written quite extensively on this on my social media page, where a local government commissioner, for example, in the local government commission, reached out in confidence with documentary evidence, saying, here's what's happening. The original Gen 20 forms, for example, we are being told to hand them over to the soldiers. There are new forms that are being produced with fresh evidence, for example, with fresh numbers that nobody knows where they come from. No, because the polling agents are not there to sign. They can't just send this form there, because they have to be signed by representative of polling agents. So that for some of them, they are calling the polling agents back so that they can sign under duress. For others, they are being sent to Lusaka so that the ECZ can announce. And that's why the point Brenda mentioned about verification is very crucial, because you don't want to force people to simply go to court when there are these avenues that are available at this stage to actually verify the authenticity of these results. For example, if you go to court, Linda mentioned some of the rules that shaped the pre-election environment, including the changes to the Constitution as well as the Electoral Act. What she didn't mention was that this president, more than any of his predecessors, I think, has appointed at once so many judges to the superior courts. The Constitutional Court, for example, has been remodeled to have a majority now that has been appointed by the current president. Many of some of the people serving on the court, for example, don't qualify to be on the bench. If we go by the standard that the same administration has applied to remove 3 of the judges whom the current president found on the bench, and so there's very limited confidence that if you go to court, you are going to get a fair hearing, because as Linda mentioned already, you have these difficulties where judges are even afraid to make decisions in such a charged environment where the security appears to be the one in charge. And what is frightening for me, I think, about this what has happened now is the fact that all loopholes seem to be closed. You can't run to court because the judges are afraid. You can't go to the ECZ and say, can we verify this thing, because people are not being allowed to ask questions. It's almost, it seems like those who are there at the tutoring center are just there to legitimate, a coronation of some kind. If you look at the results that ECZ has announced already so far, you can see difficulties already in some of them. I was taking note of the one they've announced out of the 105 constituencies that they mentioned. I'll give you an example from what I collected. So in Southern Province, you have a difference between the number of voters who turned up to vote for a presidential candidate and for members of parliament. So in Chicago, for example, the voter turnout is at presidential level was 82%, while at parliament was 66%. So the president there has a 20% more people who turned up to vote than the MP. Now, it's not possible for this to happen because the voter turnout is calculated on account of appearing in a polling station where your name is ticked to say, Sishu has appeared here and therefore he has voted. Then you calculate the total number of people who came to vote against the total number of registered voters in that polling station or in that constituency, for example. So it can't be that you have 82% people who turned up to vote at the presidential level and 66% at member of parliament level, because we are not calculating this based on who you voted for. Once I take a ballot and go and vote for a president and a councillor and anybody else, you can't know who I voted for. What you know is that I turned up to vote. And it's on that basis that the voter turnout is calculated. But you have several constituencies that have these discrepancies. In Sinazongwe, voter turnout for the presidency is at 65.8%. For the MP is at 55.5%. In Magoye East, voter turnout for the MP is at 71%. For the president is at 83%. Same constituency, same voter. In Kalomo Central, voter turnout for the MP is at 7%, but at presidential level is at 81.4%. Again, these are the discrepancies that a verification process, for example, if it's handled transparently, can really help to reduce the tension, because you're not building confidence in the results that are being announced. But it seems to be the case that all the things that you have taken for granted, in the previous election, that the verification, which is so straightforward, are suddenly no longer available. And in the end, it's a very, very significant turning point for Zambia, because a president who is produced or elected on the basis of the results that are being announced, for example, given the role of the military, the processes that have taken us here, the suspension of the vote count, the restrictions on who can ask questions and verify these results, the beating of polling agents, all the things I think point to one thing, that we don't have an impartial electoral board and justifies the concerns of people who criticize the leadership of the commission in the run of the election as one that perhaps was incapable of being impartial, given its links to the governing party. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, I just add with regards to the judiciary, my concerns, as just Shua mentioned. So just last year, I want to say it was around April, I may be mistaken, maybe May. The president, as in the executive, issued a statutory instrument to increase judges' emoluments. Now, you also have to bear in mind that the only constitutionally mandated body to review the emoluments of the judiciary is the Emoluments Commission. So that was bypassed in order to make this these substantial increments. Then secondly, earlier this year, before Parliament dissolved, we saw the appointment and ratification of 40 new judges to the superior courts. Now, I think Sushua will bear me out that quite a significant, if not majority, of these judges came from the strongholds of the ruling party, which may or may not be a coincidence. And then secondly, with regard to security of tenure, as Sushua touched on earlier, in October 2024, 3 constitutional court judges were removed from office. And certainly in my estimation, the process followed was somewhat lacking in due process. And so it has sent a chilling effect down the spines of members of the judiciary, because it appears that security of tenure may not be as secure as it once was. So this is the context within which judicial officers are operating. Maybe the other thing I'll mention is earlier today, as I was watching TV, I saw Diamond TV report that a polling station in Kabwe, I think it's Kabwe Central, had been closed because of some incident. And again, all polling agents, all electoral monitors and observers were cleared from that polling station, and only army officers and police officers remained, again calling into question these measures by the Electoral Commission. So I think it's fair to say, and I'm sure those of you, maybe Sushua is only left in the call, Fathers is still here, that this election does not appear to be free and fair. And it's unlikely that there will be a credible result. Any other questions? Somebody asked about the abductions. We did talk about it earlier. We did talk about the abduction of George Chisanga, of Bishop Mwamba, and what we know is Brian Mundubile his whereabouts are unknown, and that his house was ransacked on the 14th of August. Sushua has posted a note for anyone interested. I have written a longer opinion piece that locates the current electoral. I can't read the whole thing. Anyway, he's written a piece that you can follow him on Twitter. Is it at Shishua? What's your handle?
At Shishua.
There we go. Maybe the other issue was around the heightened tensions. So as Fides mentioned, the Electoral Commission had earlier indicated that it would release the results within 72 hours of the final closing of the final polling station, which would lead us, I think, up to Monday. So this slow issuing of results has also become problematic. It's yet to be seen whether or not we'll have the final results by Monday. But of course, tension is mounting as the election results are released. Don, do you think you can handle the Q&A box, because I'm struggling to juggle?
Okay, I'll try and look and see if there's anything. They've been. Somebody asked, Mishek Bwalia, is there a platform of engagement between ECZ, CSOs, observers, and political party representatives to address electoral issues like we had in 2021? Although I think that's a question that our comrade sister had answered, but still. Is this then, Sondlane Dube asked, and that's because I cannot pronounce how you deal with that name in Southern Africa. I try, but it's not yet perfect. Is this election tension likely to escalate or de-escalate in the next 3 days? What is the likelihood of the results being contested, and should they be contested? Is there legal ground to invoke a runoff, and under what conditions? I think you partly answered that. Then, of course, Sishua posted the link, which helped. And then Brenda Murphy is asking for a call for action, and is asking me, particularly Don Dayan, the Pan-African Lawyers Union, and other Pan-African colleagues on the call, what are the experiences and what can you advise the Zambian CSOs? So I think maybe that's a big question. And maybe Linda, depending, I can see there's a hand up by One Beauty Katebe, but maybe Linda, maybe might be a good time, if you consider it wise, to allow people to put up their hands and maybe make comments or offer solidarity or whatever support from all over Zambia and the continent. And then we deal with Brenda's call for action for all of us as Africans and Pan-Africanists. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Mrs. Katebe? You're on mute.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm listening to what is going on, and obviously I'm following also on the ground what is going on. My concern is, couldn't this be the right time for ECZ to suspend the announcement of election results? For example, in this electoral process, we have all these abductions that have happened, and people that are missing have not been accounted for yet. And I'm wondering if we can still continue announcing the results when the main opposition leader is in hiding or hijacked or whatever it is that we can call it that is happening to him. I was thinking these are some of the reasons, there's abductions, killings, and all. These are some of the reasons ECZ could have used to say, we suspend this until we see where, for example, Honorable, what's the name? Is it Mufwaya Katoto or something? What's the name of the one who was, yes.
Kafwaya.
Kafwaya something, yes. Well, like he was a big figure. Kafwaya. Yes, he is a big figure in the Zambian politics, and it was alleged openly by the honorable or the presidential candidate for Tonse that he was shot at twice in his house. The question is, has government accounted for that? And if not, why are we missing a big figure in the political circles of this country, and we are not concerned about it, and we continue with the process? Thank you.
Linda, can I just make a quick point in relation to Madam Katebe's point? I think it's 2 points there. One is the ECZ has no power, as far as I know, to suspend the counting of votes at a national scale. They can do that at polling station level. So the law as it stands, I don't think, even under the current circumstances, that decision can be just fine. The other point I think is that you have to understand the abductions that have happened here, again, who is likely to carry these abductions. The state, the Zambian government has tried very hard to dismiss the concerns of abduction and so on. These are just people who have gone in hiding. And yet, after public backlash, they have appeared in police stations. The Anglican Bishop, Trevor Mwamba, a very, very innocent man who I doubt can even kill a mosquito, is in detention in Matero police with no charge. George Sanga is in detention in Charleston with no charge. The husband, Tasira Lungu, is in detention at Central Police with no charge, for example. Kafaya Mutoto Kafaya is reported to be battling for his life, that is, assuming he's still alive, for example, following the gunshot wounds that he is said to have suffered when the military raided Munduvile's house. And so then you have other people who disappeared much earlier, like Sebastian Copland, for example. Nobody knows where they are. So what you see here is a deliberate attempt to weaken the main opposition leader's team to facilitate what is happening right now in terms of the conduct of the military and the conduct of the Electoral Commission, so that by the time the results are announced, these people who are in detention will be released. And then those who have lost will be told, go to court and petition, don't go to the streets. The president actually has made a post to that effect, I think it was yesterday or the day before, to say the opposition should never go to the streets, because when I was in opposition, we never did this. Somehow he seemed to have this tendency to present himself as the standard. If something wasn't done by him, then it shouldn't be done. But what was even alarming was that post came before the East that announced an election. He was advising the opposition already to concede and to use other avenues of registering their displeasure. Of course, out of embarrassment, the president subsequently deleted that post. But it tells you that the abductions we are talking about are likely to come to an end soon after the election results have been announced by the Electoral Commission. And I think that what we are working towards here is the outcome. They are not so much concerned with the process. Process has to deal with the verification of results. Are the results we are announcing correct? You can't establish if they are correct unless you verify them with civil society and agents of parties that are totally innocent. Otherwise, why are they there if they can't participate in the verification exercise? But it seems to be the case that this process doesn't matter. What matters is getting to the end point. So I won't be surprised tomorrow or the day after if the commission comes and says, here are the final results that we have announced, and anyone who is aggrieved should go to court, which is what the law actually provides for, that if you are aggrieved, you should go to court. But you are talking about the judiciary here that has very low trust from the public in terms of confidence in that institutions. If they went to court, there are two possible outcomes. The first is the court can confirm the result announced by the EC, or depending on evidence that the opposition can adduce, they can nullify the result and call for a fresh ballot within, I think, a certain period. Linda would guide us here in terms of the specific period. So it seems to be that we are working towards that outcome rather than building trust in the process that produces it. Thank you.
Thank you. There's McQueen Mzaza who's raised his hand. Yes, please. You're on mute.
Okay, I found it. Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, I think we need to have a certain form of context when we are discussing certain things like an election. Because what we sometimes talk about can have a chilling effect on the legitimacy of that election. I'll start with a comment that was made by Linda, that the 40 judges that were ratified by Parliament came from one region. That is not true.
I didn't say that. I said majority of them came from the strongholds.
Even that, again, is not true.
Okay.
What we have among those 40 judges are brilliant Zambians who participated in making an application to be judges. They went through the vetting system and they were appointed. At that particular point, the presidents had no opportunity to know who is who and who is what. You see, this narrative where sometimes just because there are 20 losses or 20 Tongas or 20 Bembas in a certain position, then we start saying it's tribalism. This is what is killing us. When we went with Shua at the University of Zambia, we were more losses than any other tribe. But did the University of Zambia say that, oh, there are now 20 losses, let's cut and let's bring Bembas? They were looking at us in terms of merit. And let's also start looking at other human beings in terms of merit, rather than looking at where they came from, what tribe they reside. We can get each and every judge that was appointed, and let's look at their merit. For example, I would get Judge Mundia. Judge Mundia was at Cornell University. Yes, she's Tonga, but she was at Cornell University. She was the best student at the University of Zambia. She was the best student at Ziadi. She did a master's at Cornell. So this is the quality, or these are the qualities of judges that were appointed. And these judges, the presidents only came in at the last end. He is not the one who appointed them directly. They went through a certain scrutiny. So that we should leave aside. Now let's go to the issues of abductions. There is a difference between an abduction and an arrest. First and foremost, the opposition in Zambia has been creating these narratives that the government is after them, which is not very true. They've even lied and spread a lot of propaganda that Mtoto Kafwaya was shot and is at Mainasoko. Mtoto Kafwaya has never been to Mainasoko. There is no evidence that shows that Mtoto Kafwaya actually was shot at. There is no evidence that shows that Brian Mundubire was invaded by soldiers at his house. Brian Mundubire's house is surrounded by a number of CCTV cameras.
John,
how do you know that?
John.
Yeah, how do I know
Anyway,
that?
McQueen, look.
By the way, Brian
Don.
Yes, comrade, I'm on, but I think Linda is effectively chairing us. So I would like to defer to her. I'm on.
McQueen, if you could just wrap up so that we can get more hands. If you could just quickly wrap up. You're on mute.
Sorry. Brian Mundubire is a brother, is a colleague at a bar. I've been to his house. We've had drinks together. There are a lot of CCTVs at his house. Why hasn't he shown even one journalist in Zambia that these are the soldiers that went to surround him at his house? You see, let's not spread propaganda unnecessarily, where we do not even have credible evidence. For example,
No. I think we're not going into examples. And do you have a question? Because we're taking questions at the moment.
My question is that what you are spreading right now and what you are telling these lawyers or these outsiders who are not in Zambia, it's not true.
So what's your question?
That's my concern. It's not true. Let's have a decent and honest conversation.
Thank you.
Yes, I understand certain things that you brought about are legitimate, but certain things are not true. Brian Mundubire was never surrounded by soldiers. Never.
Thank you, McQueen.
Mtoto Kafwaya has never.
McQueen, I think you've had your chance. Thank you. We'll move on to Agi Kalungubanda and then Brenda Mofia.
Thank you, Linda. Sorry I joined late, but I couldn't resist putting up my hand listening to Zaza speak. I think we as Zambians need to learn how to create environments where we can discuss issues. We have heard some of the happenings to Mundubile, and some videos have been shown. And if Zaza hasn't seen them, one, I would expect you to say, can we have all the information? And say, never, never, because we don't know. The family and Mundubile himself, I was on a program which was live when he called in to Mwamba's show, and he was talking about what happened to him. And for somebody to come here and say it never happened, I think that's being very inhuman. So it would be better for us when we have conversations like this, we come and say, this is what we're hearing, what is happening. Can we get the data and the information, and how can we contribute to what is going on? But if we keep on being polarized like this, we will not find a solution to this. So I'm just asking Zaza and people who are holding these views to say, let's bring data together, information together, and let's not say this one has done that.
Just in case they are questioning by the gate. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker was Brenda Mofia. Are you there?
Yes, I'm there, Linda. Much of what I wanted to say has already been said by Agnes. I just wanted to say that sometimes it becomes very difficult for us to have conversations about values and integrity and democracy, and more so right now. And Maclean Zaza, who has just spoken, is one person that I follow on social media, and what he just portrayed is the attitude that we're increasingly seeing of those that are just there to. He was talking about propaganda himself, and yet he has been one of the people that are loudest in terms of leashing out the propaganda and defending the current regime. I think it's quite disappointing that he would even publicly talk about all these people that have disappeared, and challenging and saying that's not never. I'll give you an example. You mentioned the bishop. The bishop is not just an Anglican bishop, but the current president of Zambia's first political party, our Liberation Party, UNIP. He was missing since Friday. And yesterday, his family put up a call. They were looking for him. They put up a call on Facebook, which I reshared on my wall. And immediately, we had somebody who's similar to Zaza coming on my wall and dismissing that in a very insensitive way, arguing that these people have actually planned their own abductions and so on and so forth. This morning, I woke up at 4 because some good Samaritan had established where the bishop was and was looking to find the family. I had to facilitate because, his wife, his siblings are not in Zambia. We had to locate them. And then even after we located him, he's being held, as Shishua has said, at Matero police station. He had no blanket, he had no medication, and all that had to be organized to be taken to him. And then when we tried to find a legal representation to immediately go to speak to him, the lawyers were told, no, he's been moved to another police station. But luckily enough for us, this good Samaritan that had taken it upon herself to go there and to see him insisted and was communicating to us that he was still at Matero. And that's how come the lawyers went back and were able to see him. So these are not things that we are imagining. They are happening. And I think we need, it's very humbling that we are having all our colleagues from the continent, and hopefully the call for action is one that reinforces the voices, because the voices of Africa and the voices of the international community is needed now more than ever. Thanks.
Thank you, Brenda. I'll take one more and then I'll let Seshua respond maybe specifically to the tribalism issue, because I think it's something you've been talking about consistently over the last 5 years. Mr. Francis Mwila.
Thank you so much, Madam Linda Kasonde, and thank you to everybody that is just participating in this very important discussion. I've heard Mr. Zaza talk about all being lies and everything. I just want to ask him a question. How do you, like in the case of Mungu, because there are a lot of instances that have made us to believe what is happening today. In the case of Mungu, the guys that were detained from the saga of the opposition up to today, they've not been released. You are a lawyer who should be able to stand to prevent and protect this nation that is very important to us as Zambians. What are you saying, or what are you going to say about those people who were caught up, those musicians who have not been charged up to today? According to the Constitution and according to you, Mr. Zaza, who is a lawyer and a representative of the people who should be respected in this nation, what do you think is happening to our democracy in that manner? Secondly, Brian Mundube, if he has made also, he has made allegations that the army had adopted him. Why hasn't the army come on the media to refute the allegations? And what are you doing as government? Because I believe you are UPND. What is government doing? How has government taken charge to see that the life of Mundubire and the allegations are brought to book? Because government is in charge of looking for, even Mutoteka for whom we are asking. Like the woman has just come, is just from asking, saying a question of the bishop who was abducted. He was abducted together. Up to today, no information, no proper administrative information from this government has been brought to the public to understand the whereabouts of these people. Are we saying now that our nation, our security is polarized such that government cannot account for the people that are being lost? If you are saying it's propaganda, because you've started now injuring our hearts. Instead of you helping the matters as a lawyer, you are now beginning to bring politics here. These are serious issues. Mutoto Kafwa is a minister who we are supposed to account for, including you are supposed to account for. Muletu Kalifia, I'm so sorry for being emotional. Yeah, you've started attacking our emotions. Please, let's be serious. This is our only nation which we have. Let's be patriotic. Let's remove the political lenses we are having in this nation. Let's be serious for once to account for each other. We are brothers. When I look at you, I should be looking at you as a brother. I shouldn't take sides because this is what is happening for me. Mutoto Kafwa has got a family. How many families are you going to injure with those lies you're trying to bring across? Sorry that I'm becoming emotional. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mwila. I'll take Eric Sakala, and then Sishira will respond, and then we'll go to call to action. Thank you. Mr. Sakala. You're on mute. Eric Sakala, are you there? Eric Sakala.
Chair, you can even take care of the chat box in case
Hello?
there is no one putting up the hand.
Hello.
Okay, he's there. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Linda. And I think I've been following the discussion that is here. It is good that concerns are being raised, and as other speakers have stated, regardless of the party that I'm with or the one that I sympathize with, when it comes to the issues of someone's life and whatever, I mean, we put aside politics. But then I think as we bring these discussions on board.
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, please. We lost you for a minute.
Yes. I think we are speaking the same language. I don't think Mr. Zaza is against democracy, even him. And I don't think he would support that one of his colleagues or friends is in detention, the family doesn't know where they are. But maybe the problem that I'm seeing is the issue of confrontation. Because every time, I can give an example. Missiles has been thrown at Mr. Zaza as regard is a sympathizer of the government. Equally, someone would say Mr. Sishua is also just someone who criticizes the government, because others have seen what he posts again. He has never said anything good about the government. So when we come to such platforms, I think it is very important to work with the facts. If people are missing, for example, have we heard from the way Linda had stated, people have made follow-ups, these people are not being seen. That's a case that we can actually argue with. But if we come to an issue with that aspect of confronting each other, then we're not going to help each other. Even Mr. Zaza himself, if we speak to him, he will be willing to join us in our fight to say, let the right thing be done. But if we are going to come and see as if we are attacking one another, then we are not helping each other. Otherwise, if these facts are true, that some people are missing, they're being detained, I mean, no one can actually argue with that. That is a bad thing. Another thing that is there is that the problem that has been there is that we have seen the opposition also creating all manners of propaganda. And this is why even the government is trying to hide in that, to say, actually, this is what these guys have been saying. So people will actually believe us even when we do a wrong thing, because they have not been truthful in other instances. So my appeal is that this is a good platform that we join solidarity with each other, but let's work with each other and work with the data that is there and get more information about it so that we can bring on board everyone, whether we perceive that person to be pro-government or not. But let us talk to them in a way that they can actually understand and appreciate the cause that we are doing, not to attack them. That's what I thought I should say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sakala. Sober reflection. I'll now invite Dr. Sishua to make his closing remarks, and then we'll have the call to action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda, and thank you so much, McQueen, for the comments. Let me address myself to some of the concerns you raised. I think Linda is right. She said majority of them come from one region, and I've done a bit of research on this because it's part of what I do. And I want to demonstrate that by making two things. In Zambia, judges are appointed in a manner that is less than clear. We don't know, for example, there's no public participation in the appointment of judges at the level of advertisement. For example, there was one instance in the recent past where they advertised following public backlash. But under the previous administration, this opaque nature in which judges are appointed was criticized. And the current president, when he was in opposition at least, promised that he will create a system, a merit-based system where people can apply, and then they are shortlisted in a very transparent and open manner. The interviews are held in a way where if I believe that Sishua is not fit to serve as a judge, I should go there and make a presentation why I think he lacks the integrity to serve in a judicial office. In South Africa, for example, the proceedings of judges' appointment are televised. People are free to go there and make this kind of contributions on why they believe this person should be served as a judge. So I think that what we need is a system that really makes it very clear in terms of how judges are hired. Because where do I take my CV, for example? When do I know that there's a recruitment that is happening, for example? What are the systems that ensure that the person that McQueen mentioned is a wife to one of the president's special assistants? If I'm sitting on the Judicial Service Commission and I have an application for somebody like her, do I consider her merit, her exceptional qualities, or am I informed by the fact that this is a spouse to somebody with enormous power that is associated with the president, for example? And in the end, the absence of such systems undermines even very good candidates like her, because people begin to make what might actually be false assumptions that she got the job on account of the relationship that she enjoys with somebody who is close to power, rather than on the merit of her credentials. I know her. She's very good. She's qualified. I'm very happy to support her. But what we want to do is not look at individuals, is to create systems so that, everybody abides by that. Everybody knows what they need to do, and that the public also have a say in the appointment, even dismissal of judges. So that's one level. The systems is very opaque. And for me, I think what is disappointing is the failure to create such a merit-based system by the current administration, because they had campaigned on a promise of changing what existed under the previous administration, which we also criticized. The second issue on the judiciary, I think, it has to do with representation. It's an important principle, representation in any democracy, but it's even much more so for us in our constitution. The constitution says those who are empowered to make an appointment in public office should ensure that there's regional diversity in that appointment. So when people raise this concern, again, it's about systems. Have we seen that diversity, for example? If I give you two examples from the recent appointment that the president made, you had the first time he appointed that was in 2023. He appointed the 20 judges at first. Out of the 20 judges, 13 came from 3 provinces. That the Zambezi region, as I call it, because that were the provinces where the Zambezi River passes. Now Zambia has 10 provinces. If you have more than 50% of the appointment at once coming from 3 provinces out of those 7, that's a problem, because then you need to explain what happened. It might be that there were not sufficient people who applied from other places, but it can't be that we should emphasize merit as if merit is only found in particular ethnic groups or in particular regions. That is wrong. We criticized this thing when it was done by the previous administration. I remember that when I was critical of the Lungu administration for marginalizing Tongas, one of the arguments that supporters of the government made was that the Bembas and the Easterners were appointed to key positions, were appointed on merit. It was as if to say that merit couldn't be found among Tongas. So you always have this kind of sentiment expressed whenever we point out these things. What we are calling for is a country where opportunities should not be seen to be a prison of one region or one particular ethnic group, for example, at any given time, because what you are doing is to create a vicious cycle where after this change of government, for example, the next administration, if it comes from the other region, it does the reverse of what was the previous one was doing. Already we are seeing that now. What Hichilema is doing now is the reverse of what Lungu was doing, because under the PF, we saw groups that were prioritized, it's Bemba and Easterners. We criticized that not so that Hichilema could do the same thing, but benefiting groups from the region where he and I come from, but so that he could create a system where opportunities are not seen to be a prism of one particular region or the other. The other point I think is about this idea of abduction versus arrest. It's true there's a difference, but what is very disturbing about this one is 2 things. One, when you are arrested, you should be summoned before the police. Your rights are read to you. You are told what offense you are alleged to have committed. You are given bond after you have been formally arrested and charged, or you are taken to court within the period prescribed by law. That's not happening. There were people who were arrested with Brian Mundubile when they were in Western Province campaigning, musicians, artists who were performing with him. It has been weeks now, and they're just held in detention. That's against the law, because the law has that principle of 48 hours to say, can you take this person to court? They haven't been taken to court. The charges which they have been slapped with, like disorderly conduct or a breach of whatever, those are bondable offenses. Again, we criticize this abuse of the law under the previous administration. What we criticize under the PF shouldn't be right now, shouldn't be correct when done by the leadership that is in power now, because the principle should be the same. Equality in how we treat our fellow human beings, and there shouldn't be any selective application of the law. That's what we are saying. If you have the case of the unit president and the Anglican Bishop Trevor Mwamba, he disappears when he was at Mundubile's house alongside the other people who disappeared. There are complaints to say these people have been abducted. Days pass. The police don't issue a statement, so it's not true. Actually, they're in our custody and you've arrested them for this and that reason. When pressure mounts, we are told today that they're actually in the custody of the police, for example. We are told they have not been charged to this day. We are not saying they have not committed an offense. We don't know that. We are saying, can they be treated fairly, regardless of their political affiliation? We can't defend the rights of anybody if we begin to be very selective in whose rights to defend. In fact, this is to be a human rights defense. If at all, I have to look at you to say, oh, this person may be associated with the opposition or the ruling party. I need to listen to what you are saying and then apply the same principle to everyone on the basis of the law that applies. And then when you say Munduvile didn't, it's not true that Munduvile was abducted or the military went there and what, and you say this is not true. It's one thing to say this is not true and to present evidence in support of your position. Say here the evidence that I'm advancing. It's another thing when you simply dismiss what somebody else says as not true because it doesn't sound true to you. We should be very careful that we don't invalidate the sentiment, the feelings, the thoughts of other people in a democracy simply because we believe them. We think they are untrue. Here's Munduvile who comes and says, the police came to my place, they traumatized me, for example, they did A, B, C, D. If that's true, you and I are third parties. We don't know. What we should do is to encourage the police, for example, who have been named, or the military, what have been named, so they did this, to say, can you please respond? And categorically deny that's not true, we didn't go there. It's not true that we shot at so and so. There hasn't been that denial. It's not our place to sit where I am comfortably, look at you and say, McQueen, whatever you are saying, you want to say now, it's not true. I dismiss whatever you're saying as untrue. No. Democracy requires active listening. The idea that even if we may have different views, what we owe each other is a listening ear and the capacity to say, is there a way we can come together on certain things and say, this is wrong, it shouldn't happen to anyone, regardless whether or not we like that person or we think that person belongs to the opposition. So that would be my appeal. Can we create systems that apply to everyone rather than a scenario where you have an instance like in the case of presentation of judges. If you look at the judges that HH appointed before the elections, there were about 26 new High Court judges who were appointed to the High Court. When you look at again, if you apply the principle of representation, say, okay, if there are 26 and Zambia has how many 10 provinces, what was the distribution in terms of regional diversity? If you look at it at the constitutional principle, so I'm just checking the figure. Okay, 17 of the 26 High Court judges come from 3 provinces. 17 of the 26 newly appointed High Court judges come from the Zambezi region. Then you have 4 out of the 7 that you appointed in the Court of Appeal from 3 provinces. You have 2 of the 3 new judges to the Constitutional Court from those 3 provinces as well. You had one, I think, who went to the Supreme Court, who was the president's personal lawyer, an ex-captain in Zambia Air Force, Butler Stanley, who has never served in the judiciary before. He's airlifted from the private sector direct to the Supreme Court, for example, overlooking experience and serving judges in the superior courts, for example. Again, what we want to do here is to create systems that to ensure that there's a very clear outline to say, if you are serving the private sector, you've never practiced law, rather you've never served on the bench, for example. Here, the criteria that should be followed to make sure that we are not accused, of being a recipient of, favoritism from your friend, because it might be that Stanley, for example, is very competent and qualified and a good person, but here's somebody who is actually being appointed I think a year or 2 before they reach the retirement age. It's almost as if they're just being taken there so that they can get a permanent retirement, because judges get these hefty retirements after they leave office, regardless of how long you have served on the bench. So if you send a friend to go and serve at the highest level, Supreme Court, for example, with only a year or 2 remaining for that person retires, it's like you are basically giving this person pension at the expense of the public. I'm saying, can we create systems that will ensure that these things don't happen, regardless of whether it's under Ichirema or under Edgar or the next leader? Let's make sure that we try to create systems that advance our collective interests rather than personal considerations. Thank you so much, Lynn.
Thank you for your excellent insights, Dr. Sishua. I think that was a very balanced and fair response to our commenters. We are concluding now. Don, if you could go first with your call to action from a regional perspective, and I'll try and end with a local perspective on what our call to action is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Linda. And I also thank very much the colleagues who have stayed with us for literally 2 hours, including colleagues that are joining us from Eastern Africa, from West Africa, and so on. Obviously, we as a Pan-African Lawyers Union and various other civic formations, we do monitor each of our 55 African countries across the 5 regions on a regular basis. We will not be able to have as detailed and as nuanced information as actors within the countries will have, but we do have a pretty good sense. Today's discussion, I think, was quite useful, where we had from various sides and various perspectives on what is really going on in the country. On our part, as the Pan-African Lawyers Union, we'll continue to engage. We'll continue to engage, especially with our regional bodies, the African Union, the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, the Southern African Development Community, both their secretariats, their peace and security organs, and the election observation missions that were actually on the ground, some of whom we've been talking to even as we talk. And we'll be able then to see in terms of what they can do to try and promote democratic governance, good governance, protection and promotion of human people's rights in Zambia as elsewhere on the continent. Zambia, just like Ghana and a few other countries, a few of the countries we've really looked up to as places where there's been stability, there's been political decency, there's been orderly transitions across individuals and across different political parties and across regimes. So it would be a pity if that were to be imperiled now, but we'll continue to verify the facts. As you may know, we do have actually an important African Union organ housed or headquartered in Lusaka, and that is the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council of the African Union, which is a citizen body of the African Union. We are in talks with them. So we'll continue to monitor the space, and we'll continue to ensure there's accountability, and including transitional justice for anything that we find that may have been done wrong in terms of crime or in terms of conduct that does not meet the standards set up in various African Union, COMESA, and SADC principles, including the principles governing elections. So we just tell our Zambian colleagues, we're in full solidarity with you, we are with you, we are monitoring the situation, we'll engage in other conversations, and where rule of law allows us to utilize complaints mechanisms or accountability mechanisms, that will certainly do it. Thank you very much, and I hand over to my comrade, Linda Kasonde, to close us off.
Thank you, Don. Before I give my final remarks, I see a hand from Mrs. Frida Mwamba Brazil, who is the sister of Bishop Trevor Mwamba, who has been detained after being abducted over the past few days. So, Frida, if you could just give your remarks.
Sure. Thank you so much, Linda. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't know where everybody is, but I assume you're everywhere. As Linda, thank you so much for the introduction. I just want to validate a couple of things. One is I'm based in Atlanta. My whole family have been trying to get in touch with Bishop Mwamba since Friday. I actually did verbally speak with him on Friday morning. And as of 20 hours on Friday, it like he was disappeared off the face of the earth. We did reach out and try and find out where he was. We had no opportunity to get in touch with him. His phone was switched off. And what happened is we put out a notice. We waited for the 24 hours. We put out a notice on Facebook, had different people look at it. And we finally were able to find out that he had been picked up. He was actually at the house of Mr. Brian Mundubile when the army raided. About 70 to 80 people went to the home, and my brother happened to be there. He was picked up from there, and then he was taken to different places. And we were able to get in touch with him this morning. We're able to validate that he's fine. He was actually giving mass to the to his cellmates. There are about 33 people in the cell with him. So he was given meds. He's definitely shaken. And what we're asking for is just support, because I grew up in Zambia. This is not the Zambia that we experienced. I think everybody was free. So we question the democracy, we question the human rights, and we look for the support, because this is not a country thing. This is a regional opportunity for us to step up and do what is absolutely correct. So thank you very much. I came on because I understand that there are people that are doubting it, and I can understand that because of the amount of miscommunication that's going on about that there are no raids. But if somebody voluntarily goes into a cell for hiding, I don't think that's the first place that they would go to. So again, he was picked up. He is being detained. We have not been given a charge, and we are moving swiftly to try and get him out of that place as soon as possible. Thank you very much, Linda.
Thank you, Frida, for that confirmation. As I conclude, firstly, I would like to thank the Pan-African Lawyers Union, PALU, for your solidarity with us, for hosting us tonight in our hour of need. And as they say, a friend in need is a friend indeed. And we thank you for coming through for us. Thank you for those of you who have joined us from Zambia and further afield. We appreciate you taking an interest in what is happening in our country. And as they say, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so it is right that everyone should take an interest in what's happening here. We don't want those countries in our region that are more stable to descend into the abyss of authoritarianism and oppressiveness. So thank you for coming today and showing your solidarity. As you know, in terms of our call to action, firstly, we would like to safeguard the lives and the interests of those who have been abducted. The president of the NRP-UP, the leading opposition candidate, Mr. Brian Mundubile's whereabouts are unknown. His house was ransacked. I've seen the videos and the photos, and we don't know where he is. Those who are in detention, and there are about 30, some of whom have been in detention for several weeks during the campaign period and have not been allowed to go to court or to seek redress. Again, I mentioned there's some issues with getting court appearances. As I mentioned earlier, has been a challenge for these people, and they're being held without due cause or due process. We also would like to call on all bar associations to act in solidarity with us by issuing statements in the international media, not only raising the concerns that we have raised in this press conference, but also calling upon our government to abide by the rule of law and to uphold democracy and constitutionalism in the country, and to guarantee that they will not continue to interfere with the electoral process, as we have described. Also, calling on people to, in a way, protect and defend the judiciary. We understand that they may be under intimidation, and there may be some threats have been issued. So maybe if anybody has contacts with the ICJ, if they can, find ways of supporting our judiciary. These are very troubling times. These are unprecedented times for our country, and it's imperative that we have all institutions in place to protect our democracy. And lastly, as civil society, we've been through some tough times. Seshua mentioned that there's been an attempt to weaken our civil society in Zambia through co-option, through also intimidation. Equally, our media has been somewhat suppressed in the sense that the independent, so-called independent broadcasting authority has been, wielding its power over particularly television media. And we've also seen private media being co-opted by the ruling government. And these are all troubling signs because we have nowhere to turn. We have nowhere to broadcast what is happening in our country because of self-censorship, because of fear and intimidation. And we call upon you to help us amplify our voice so that we can restore democracy in our country. And also, those of you in the region, we really don't know where we're going at the moment. And there may come a time when we need help and refuge. So we hope that you will open your doors in that time of need. But once again, thank you to you all for coming tonight. We really appreciate your solidarity. Thank you so much and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you.